This video will be concerning the history of diseases in Asia. It is not medical misinformation and will cite scientific sources, the World Health Organization, National Institutes of Health, and all of the others that I can find as well. This is a retroactive study also including disease transmission over the last few years in China and other countries. It is not medical misinformation, no matter how loudly YouTube and Google scream. Instead of saying that lie, they should just say, "You're not one of the academia, we don't want you publishing by using YouTube." Instead of being honest about this, I will continue listening to them lie to me about the real reason that they're flagging my channel. 2019, November 14th or earlier, American National Center for Medical Intelligence was monitoring internal Chinese traffic and them talking about a new, novel, potential virus and a bunch of outbreaks in Wuhan, which have been since denied. Wuhan is a large area. November 17th, just a few days later, retroactively it was discovered a 55-year-old individual from the province and the area may have had a specific disease that we all know about. 10 days later, in Brazil, raw sewage samples that are regularly taken were collected. Some of them were recently tested specifically that were still sealed in 2021 and found to have 100,000 copies of the disease in question per liter. That means within 10 stinking days, it was in the Western Hemisphere in South America. In the same month, no date and time found, in the United States, the same disease was in the United States. Retroactive testing samples from people for all sorts of reasons. These are samples that are contaminated with the disease in December and November. December in the United States. Just December. In November, in Italy, a Milan resident was shown to have it, again by testing old samples that have been stored, because the person had a medical issue, a rash, an unexplained rash. They're testing every single tissue sample that they found that was sealed properly. Every preserved sample is showing November and December of 2019 in Europe, North America, and South America. November and December of 2019, this was showing up in the general population, the sewer system, who knows what else. That's the video. It has nothing to do with where it came from anymore. This disease is not unique. Well, it is. But it's not unique only because of where it happened or what political or ideological argument you want to have in the comment section. This thing had spread to North and South America and Europe within 1.5 months, most likely. December 10th, 2019, a female seafood vendor is now found to have been the earliest known case at the Wuhan wet market. Wet food? Starting to sound like a cat. That was a retroactive testing in 2020 or 2021. They've double-checked it. And 10 of the 19 first cases have been found by people being asked later, or more accurately investigated thoroughly by Chinese officials. They led directly back to the seafood market, the Wuhan wet market, exclusively. In China, the epicenter was Wuhan. Worldwide, I don't think it matters anymore, does it? It was in the sewer system in Brazil. 10 days after the first case that's not even really confirmed, a 55-year-old man in China. We are an interconnected planet. You must learn to give a damn about every damn thing that happens in another country, because if you don't, you will be made to. We are all giving a damn about what happens in BF Egypt, literally and figuratively. December 29th, investigation concerning the market, first start. Doctors finally realize they're dealing with a new disease, something unique, and they don't understand it yet. I want to point out that everything up to December, were asymptomatic cases. This thing started off as something that would maybe give you a case of the sniffles or maybe a rash on your arm or leg. That's it. And then it turned into something that could kill in less than a month and a half after it first infected humans. The last stage of its adaptation was finding out how to infect humans and then kill them. The priority was spread, not kill, if you want to believe it has a purpose in its mind. And yeah, retroactive checking, even though the Chinese government has suppressed information, they're guilty of that. It wasn't caused by the lab because the lab had the lowest incidence of infection of any kind. They went back and looked at everything. Rashes, foot fungus, everything. No sign of the shit at all. Because it's a sealed up level whatever biolab. You would expect them to have a lower incidence of disease transfer from the outside world. I'm sorry, it isn't the damn lab. If it was the lab, you could say we have some level of control over it. It's man-made, then we can figure out how to fix it. They know how to fix it. It's a disease that... No, that's not true. This is literally wild created. I'll bring up the rest of it in a minute. December 31st, cluster of cases, pneumonia. Full pneumonia by December 31st. Christmas present for the world starting up. All of it associated with the seafood market. Retroactively, we've gotten transparency by grabbing the information, whistleblowers, people leaking information. January 7th, 2020, Chinese health authorities confirmed that the cluster was associated with that virus. Only internally, hiding it behind euphemisms, knowing Gaijin, human, American, white people wouldn't get it. Chop, chop. March 14th, first case was possibly traced back to 2019. That was an old man. Academic RNA sequence articles find a maximum duration of this changeover to be from October. We still haven't found the October surprise. 2019, patient 0. April 2020, China imposed restrictions on any communications. You have to go to the central government officials. That is the end of anything going on except whistleblowing. And they have refused to let people review what the fuck happened back then retroactively. And, yes, there are rumors, no confirmation, that they've just gone ahead and just started burning paperwork and putting people in fields someplace working instead of doing medical work, because they'd rather deal with it that way than admit to anything, because the Chinese government has prided itself on having absolute control over people's behavior. This disease is spread primarily by humans, and humans cannot spread disease if they obey the order, stay 6 feet or more apart, and wear a mask. And obviously, they didn't. You can watch videos of the wet market where people weren't wearing masks, and the video time and date stamps in the corner show it was during cold and flu season in China. The Chinese government wasn't able to control it. Also, they were selling and reselling animals that were forbidden in China. The Chinese government isn't able to control their population any more than any other government, but they can't admit that, because that means the Communist Party is not a god. They don't give a shit about life and death. They give a shit about appearances. Yes, I'm going to get flagged for saying the obvious. 2021, after getting China medical data released, hacking, not like we were monitoring it. Retroactive information, again, 10 of the first 19 cases of the disease that are being able to test for, and also cases where it was serious enough to equate to being locked up in a hospital, were from the wet market, exclusively, over 50%. We're talking about the disease that normally, like 40% or more of the population is asymptomatic, and obviously those were all asymptomatic cases in Brazil. They weren't showing cold and flu season stuff, because for them, that isn't cold and flu season, because they're below the fucking equator. For them, it's summer, in October. And it was coming out in the sewer system. And in Milan, Italy, where everybody bitches and complains when they're sick and whines about it for sympathy, nobody was complaining about this. It was asymptomatic first. Then it mutated very quickly within a month or two. It became lethal. The asymptomatic version might have actually saved a bunch of people's lives by giving them natural immunity. It was all over the United States no, it didn't, because natural immunity doesn't work on it, because the next thing I have to tell you about this disease is it does not encourage you to have an immunity after exposure. We're seeing that. Even after immunization, it's not getting any. We're at the 10-minute and 15-second mark, and I want you to listen. This disease may be immune to us. Letting it mutate into something more like a head cold is maybe the only way to do it, and the only way to stop it is to stay away from each other, wear your masks, and I recommend getting a vaccine because the vaccine makes it less likely for you to die. It's currently, Omicron may be the head cold version of it. If it turns into that, just like every other disease has, because that's going to be more likely for it to survive on a Darwinistic level, that's what we want. If it turns into another flu and it doesn't kill people anymore, we're good. But the Chinese government has been monitoring infections for decades, specifically from bats, and they weren't able to do shit. Their system didn't fall apart. They're lying about the fact that they detected things and didn't recognize it. They just didn't know what they were looking at because it didn't behave like a disease. It behaved like a fucking head cold or a rash. After getting the data, we now know that it was the Wuhan seafood market, wet market. Now we're going to discuss another source. Some will claim that it was a disease from humans infecting bats. Phun Vinh Tin A, the district and province in Laos, Limestone Cave. 250 miles from the Chinese border, a smuggling path of wild animals that ended up at the seafood market, at the wet market, whatever name you want to give it, 1,100 miles away. A horseshoe bat was found and tested recently, and it carried a high match for the disease we're dealing with. The disease we're dealing with, match, is different in this case, and it is probably or absolutely not a human infecting a bat, because antibodies for it are being found in the population, and it's a 96.8% match to the current disease, and has the ACE receptor variations that are a lot more similar than you might think, almost as similar as it would be to another copy of the same disease we're dealing with. Almost the same variation, except other genetic markers show that this is absolutely older. 2017 timing? It's been floating around in the bat population there, maybe, or not. But it's a distant relative and it doesn't do anything to people. It'll infect them, give them a minor cough, and the population in the area is showing antibodies to it. And this part of, why don't you look up this province of Laos and see what their rate of infection is? Maybe we found its granddad. It's called BANAL 52. The 52 has to do with a 50-second sample out of some set or something like that, not a year. Banal. How ironic. Its RBD, virus binding domain for ACE receptor, is very similar to the one we're dealing with and the disease we're dealing with. Chinese government has been trying to control their population and prevent imports of illegal animals, and it was their fault. They espoused Chinese natural medicine a long time ago, the barefoot doctor thing. It's a myth they created because they couldn't afford to take care of their own people because communism doesn't fucking work. And absolute control over people doesn't work. And the Chinese government's response to anybody stepping out of line is to move the line or drag them kicking and screaming into it. And everything about this, from it transferring from Laos possibly to it escaping all over the planet in a month, and them needing to lie about shit, and them not even keeping us from finding out the information by us getting the stuff leaked to find out that this probably went back to October, started off as something banal, and turned into something horribly dangerous in less than a month. That represents a loss of control by the Chinese Communist Party. That's why the shit is this way. And none of it leads back to that fucking lab because, to be blunt, they had a lower incidence at the lab than anywhere else. And it was worldwide in a month. Don't forget that. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Goodbye, Pooh Bear.